Yellow. Oh, you guys probably don't need to see that. There we go. It's going crazy. So, I need to be relatively quick this morning because I got to race over to my mom's for coffee on the dock with my mom and Michael Drinkwalter, who is awesome. I'm going to make some coffee. We're going to race over there like crazy people. Sorry, I just want to pull up the, you know what, I should save the battery power on that one and do it over here. There we go. You know what, I should save the battery power on that one and do it over. Yoink. We'll do some sharesy-wearsies. Oh, that's weird. Okay, let's get rid of this. Go over there. There we go. Do that recursive weirdness. Sharing out to a bunch of pages. The first weekly email just went out, which is awesome. To get that, you can just text the word Pasco to 22828. It's real easy and simple. Actually throw this one up on the music page today just for fun. Yoink. Yeah, that'll do. Dag a nabbit. Oh, that's weird. Like shows up in the top corner. Dag. That's really interesting. Mr. Bernie. Looks like it's just you and me, buddy. Oh, that's why we gotta do that. There we go. Dino. What's going on, guys? Yeah, so I got an interesting TED Talk for you guys today. It's from a lady that got out of the Westboro Baptist Church. The reason why I was interested in this is we have been on the show is talking a lot about the fact that it seems like people will hold on to really, really stringent beliefs, but it seems like it's more of a tribal identifier, like a blue shirt, red shirt, whatever, right? Like it seems like, we talked about yesterday, like there's some people now that believe that the world is flat. And it seems like the reason for that is that they get to belong to a really, really exclusive group. Like that becomes a tribal identifier. And there's a lot of other tribal identifiers that you can think of. And of course, the Westboro Baptist Church is, they identify themselves by being against basically everyone else, right? It's a small, very insular group. And I personally believe that it's more about belonging than it is about the actual reasoning behind anything that they do, because there isn't really any reasoning. Anyway, I think that she might actually be talking about this, probably a lot more intelligent than me. So let's just get into it.
I was a blue-eyed, chubby-cheeked 5-year-old when I joined my family on the picket line for the first time. My mom made me leave my dolls in the minivan. I'd stand on a street corner in the heavy Kansas humidity, surrounded by a few dozen relatives, with my tiny fists clutching a sign that I couldn't read yet. Gays are worthy of death. This was the beginning. Our protest soon became a daily occurrence and an international phenomenon, and as a member of Westboro Baptist Church, I became a fixture on picket lines across the country. The end of my anti-gay picketing career, and life as I knew it, came 20 years later, triggered in part by strangers on Twitter who showed me the power of engaging the other. In my home, life was framed as an epic spiritual battle between good and evil. The good was my church and its members, and the evil was everyone else. My church's antics were such that we were constantly at odds with the world, and that reinforced our otherness on a daily basis. Make a difference between the unclean and the clean, the verse says. And so we did. From baseball games to military funerals, we trekked across the country with neon protest signs in hand to tell others exactly how unclean they were and exactly why they were headed for damnation. This was the focus of our whole lives. This was the only way for me to do good in a world that sits in Satan's lap. And like the rest of my 10 siblings, I believed what I was taught with all my heart, and I pursued Westboro's agenda with a special sort of zeal. In 2009, that zeal brought me to Twitter. Initially, the people I encountered on the platform were just as hostile as I expected. They were the digital version of the screaming hordes I'd been seeing at protests since I was a kid. But in the midst of that digital brawl, a strange pattern developed. Someone would arrive at my profile with the usual rage and scorn. I would respond with a custom mix of Bible verses, pop culture references, and smiley faces. They would be understandably confused and caught off guard, but then a conversation would ensue. And it was civil, full of genuine curiosity on both sides. How had the other come to such outrageous conclusions about the world? Sometimes the conversation even bled into real life. People I'd sparred with on Twitter would come out to the picket line to see me when I protested in their city. A man named David was one such person. He ran a blog called Ideological, and after several months of heated but friendly arguments online, he came out to see me at a picket in New Orleans. He brought me a Middle Eastern dessert from Jerusalem, where he lives, and I brought him kosher chocolate and held a God hates Jews sign. There was no confusion about our positions, but the line between friend and foe was becoming blurred. We'd started to see each other as human beings, and it changed the way we spoke to one another. It took time, but eventually these conversations planted seeds of doubt in me. My friends on Twitter took the time to understand Westboro's doctrines, and in doing so, they were able to find inconsistencies I'd missed my entire life. Why did we advocate the death penalty for gays when Jesus said, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone"? How could we claim to love our neighbor while at the same time praying for God to destroy them? The truth is that the care shown to me by these strangers on the internet was itself a contradiction. It was growing evidence that people on the other side were not the demons I'd been led to believe. These realizations were life-altering. Once I saw that we were not the ultimate arbiters of divine truth, but flawed human beings, I couldn't pretend otherwise. I couldn't justify our actions, especially our cruel practice of protesting funerals and celebrating human tragedy. These shifts in my perspective contributed to a larger erosion of trust in my church, and eventually it made it impossible for me to stay. In spite of overwhelming grief and terror, I left Westboro in 2012. In those days just after I left, the instinct to hide was almost paralyzing. I wanted to hide from the judgment of my family, who I knew would never speak to me again, people whose thoughts and opinions had meant everything to me. And I wanted to hide from the world I'd rejected for so long, people who had no reason at all to give me a second chance after a lifetime of antagonism. And yet, unbelievably, they did. The world had access to my past because it was all over the internet, thousands of tweets and hundreds of interviews, everything from local TV news to the Howard Stern show. But so many embraced me with open arms anyway. I wrote an apology for the harm I'd caused, but I also knew that an apology could never undo any of it. All I could do was try to build a new life and find a way somehow to repair some of the damage. People had every reason to doubt my sincerity, but most of them didn't. And given my history, it was more than I could have hoped for. Forgiveness and the benefit of the doubt. It still amazes me. I spent my first year away from home, adrift with my younger sister, who had chosen to leave with me. We walked into an abyss, but we were shocked to find light and a way forward in the same communities we targeted for so long. David, my Jewish friend from Twitter, invited us to spend time among a Jewish community in Los Angeles. We slept on couches in the home of a Hasidic rabbi and his wife and their 4 kids. The same rabbi that I'd protested 3 years earlier with a sign that said, "Your rabbi is a whore." We spent long hours talking about theology and Judaism and life while we washed dishes in their kosher kitchen and chopped vegetables for dinner. They treated us like family. They held nothing against us. And again, I was astonished. That period was full of turmoil, but One part I've returned to often is a surprising realization I had during that time, that it was a relief and a privilege to let go of the harsh judgments that instinctively ran through my mind about nearly every person I saw. I realized that now I needed to learn. I needed to listen. This has been at the front of my mind lately because I can't help but see in our public discourse so many of the same destructive impulses that ruled my former church. We celebrate tolerance and diversity more than at any other time in memory, and still we grow more and more divided. We want good things: justice, equality, freedom, dignity, prosperity. But the path we've chosen looks so much like the one I walked away from 4 years ago. We've broken the world into us and them, only emerging from our bunkers long enough to lob rhetorical grenades at the other camp. We write off half the country as out-of-touch liberal elites or racist, misogynist bullies. No nuance, no complexity, no humanity. Even when someone does call for empathy and understanding for the other side, the conversation nearly always devolves into a debate about who deserves more empathy. And just as I learned to do, we routinely refuse to acknowledge the flaws in our positions or the merits in our opponents. Compromise is anathema. We even target people on our own side when they dare to question the party line. This path has brought us cruel sniping, deepening polarization, and even outbreaks of violence. I remember this path. It will not take us where we want to go. What gives me hope is that we can do something about this. The good news is that it's simple, and the bad news is that it's hard. We have to talk and listen to people we disagree with. It's hard because we often can't fathom how the other side came to their positions. It's hard because righteous indignation, that sense of certainty that ours is the right side, is so seductive. It's hard because it means extending empathy and compassion to people who show us hostility and contempt. The impulse to respond in kind is so tempting, but that isn't who we want to be. We can resist, and I will always be inspired to do so by those people I encountered on Twitter, apparent enemies who became my beloved friends. And in the case of one particularly understanding and generous guy, my husband, there was nothing special about the way I responded to him. What was special was their approach. I thought about it a lot over the past few years, and I found 4 things they did differently that made real conversation possible. These 4 steps were small but powerful, and I do everything I can to employ them in difficult conversations today. The first is, don't assume bad intent. My friends on Twitter realized that even when my words were aggressive and offensive, I sincerely believed I was doing the right thing. Assuming ill motives almost instantly cuts us off from truly understanding why someone does and believes as they do. We forget that they're a human being with a lifetime of experience that shaped their mind, and we get stuck on that first wave of anger, and the conversation has a very hard time ever moving beyond it. But when we assume good or neutral intent, we give our minds a much stronger framework for dialogue. The second is ask questions. When we engage people across ideological divides, asking questions helps us map the disconnect between our differing points of view. That's important because we can't present effective arguments if we don't understand where the other side is actually coming from, and because it gives them an opportunity to point out flaws in our positions. But asking questions serves another purpose. It signals to someone that they're being heard. When my friends on Twitter stopped accusing and started asking questions, I almost automatically mirrored them. Their questions gave me room to speak, but they also gave me permission to ask them questions and to truly hear their responses. It fundamentally changed the dynamic of our conversation. The third is stay calm. This takes practice and patience, but it's powerful. At Westboro, I learned not to care how my manner of speaking affected others. I thought my rightness justified my rudeness. Harsh tones, raised voices, insults, interruptions. But that strategy is ultimately counterproductive. Dialing up the volume and the snark is natural in stressful situations, but it tends to bring the conversation to an unsatisfactory, explosive end. When my husband was still just an anonymous Twitter acquaintance, our discussions frequently became hard and pointed, but he always refused to escalate. Instead, he would change the subject. He would tell a joke or recommend a book or gently excuse himself from the conversation. We knew the discussion wasn't over, just paused for a time to bring us back to an even keel. People often lament that digital communication makes us less civil, but this is one advantage that online conversations have over in-person ones. We have a buffer of time and space between us and the people whose ideas we find so frustrating. We can use that buffer. Instead of lashing out, we can pause, breathe, change the subject, or walk away, and then come back to it when we're ready. And finally, make the argument. This might seem obvious, but one side effect of having strong beliefs is that we sometimes assume that the value of our position is or should be obvious and self-evident, that we shouldn't have to defend our positions because they're so clearly right and good, that if someone doesn't get it, it's their problem, that it's not my job to educate them. But if it were that simple, we would all see things the same way. As kind as my friends on Twitter were, if they hadn't actually made their arguments, it would have been so much harder for me to see the world in a different way. We are all a product of our upbringing, and our beliefs reflect our experiences. We can't expect others to spontaneously change their own minds. If we want change, we have to make the case for it. My friends on Twitter didn't abandon their beliefs or their principles, only their scorn. They channeled their infinitely justifiable offense and came to me with pointed questions tempered with kindness and humor. They approached me as a human being, and that was more transformative than 2 full decades of outrage, disdain, and violence. I know that some might not have the time or the energy or the patience for extensive engagement, but as difficult as it can be, reaching out to someone we disagree with is an option that is available to all of us. And I sincerely believe that we can do hard things, not just for them, but for us and our future. Escalating disgust and intractable conflict are not what we want for ourselves or our country or our next generation. My mom said something to me a few weeks before I left Westboro, when I was desperately hoping there was a way I could stay with my family. People I have loved with every pulse of my heart since even before I was that chubby-cheeked 5-year-old standing on a picket line holding a sign I couldn't read. She said, "You're just a human being, my dear, sweet child." She was asking me to be humble, not to question, but to trust God and my elders. But to me, she was missing the bigger picture, that we're all just human beings, that we should be guided by that most basic fact and approach one another with generosity and compassion. Each one of us contributes to the communities and the cultures and the societies that we make up. The end of this spiral of rage and blame begins with one person who refuses to indulge these destructive, seductive impulses. We just have to decide that it's going to start with us. Thank you.
Yeah, Dino just nailed it. Worse than cults. Groups that have us versus them mentality is the real issue. I completely and totally agree. So, Mr. Drankwalter just showed up. Zoe, you're definitely going to want to watch that one. That was really good. So I'm going to run through my work, just because it's what we do. The goal review thing, I'll wait till next week. So if you can, write down 3 amazing things that happened to you yesterday, 3 things you are grateful for, 3 things that it would be awesome if it happened today. So for me, those things are, yesterday, did an interview with the Bamboo Bike World Tour. These guys are making bikes out of bamboo. Dino, you will lose your mind when you get introduced to these guys. They are the coolest. They're from France. I'm going to be having a Baboon Room episode with them coming up pretty soon, audio and then video. Had Dr. Drew on for coffee yesterday morning with G Money. That was awesome. And then had Karen Bailey from our real estate expert, and Jackie, our travel guru, and my mom. Actually had like a little wine on my mom's dock yesterday, which was really awesome. The quote today is, you got to get up every morning with determination if you're going to go to bed with satisfaction. That's a good one. I've been getting back to that sort of ethos the last little bit. I'm really grateful for Tracer Ray. I actually put out the first weekly email update this morning. It's going to come out every Friday from now on. And if you want to grab that, text PASCO to 22828. Anyway, I put a little section in there called the Weekly Hero. And for me, this week, that's Tracy. She's helping me out with the water heater contest. Is blowing the doors off the water heater contest. But even more than that, everything that she does in our G&G Fit group, like she, I think, posts more than anybody else, is an accountability buddy that she just decided she was going to be an accountability buddy with like 4 or 5 other people, messages them and, like, hey, engages with them, asking how their day is, and just is making it about everybody else, and is also achieving some really awesome things herself. So I'm like legit super grateful. I'm also grateful for Mr. Travis Moorhead, who messaged me from the Great Spirit Farm saying, hey, there's some people here you might want to come and meet. And that's how I met the guys from Bamboo Bike World Tour. They're amazeballs. And my mom, whose birthday it is today. Happy birthday, Mom. So what would make today great? I got coffee with Mr. Drankwalter. Showed up a little early, so we're going to have to race over to my mom's place. Got some house cleaning. I got to do some house cleaning. We got some family coming. And I would love for our new buddy KW to have a good show. He's opening for me at Skinny's this afternoon. So it's going to be sometime between 4 and 7. Not entirely sure when he's going to get there, but he's going to be playing a set tonight, which I think is going to be really cool. And then after that, if you're bored, I'm going to be playing at yesterday's for a couple of sets after Skinny's. So Karen said yesterday, connected with a dear childhood friend, the CRISPR salon thing. Yeah, I forgot about that. Good night's sleep. There was a lot going on yesterday. Shined up the resume, sent it out, maybe a sunset boat cruise with weather cooperates, like that. Eric said yesterday I made the house look fly as fuck for the landlord to take pics. Well done. Got a super deal on internet cable for my move to Beacon Woods. Finances came from a random source, which now makes our move even easier. Awesome sauce. Lunch provided for me. Completed making homemade sugar scrub. Don't know what that is, but it sounds fun. Learning to embrace who I am, even though people have a hard time accepting me. Well, I'm sorry that they do that, Deanna. That's ridiculous. Zoe has a clean house. Friends know I need a hug before I do. Today's Friday, and I get to be with Greg and Casey, which means, of course, that the new show is going on today, which is awesome sauce. All right. Eric, thanks, man. All right, well, Chris, one of these days. And Chris, we should actually do, I've been doing this Music Monday thing. We should have you come out and we'll just like jam for an hour online. There's a couple of those that have gotten like 20,000 views. Like, it's pretty popular. Anyway, I got a guest here, so I'm going to go and hang out with him, and coffee will start on the Coffee on the Dock page in a half hour.